Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to bring you another free webinar from Desert Waters Correctional Outreach. Our topic today is the future of corrections staff wellness, entitled Keeping the End in Mind, Continuing the Corrections Wellness Journey. I'm Brent Parker, retired corrections veteran, Desert Waters advisor and instructor. I'm honored to be your host for today's discussion, and I'd like to introduce our two guests. First, we have a great friend and colleague, William Young. Bill has worked in corrections since 2005. He's the author of two great books entitled When Home Becomes a Housing Unit and The Nothing That Never Happened. Both books highlight the way corrections can negatively impact an officer's personal life, and both are available on Amazon. And I can't say enough good things about these books, so please check them out. Bill's mission is to help staff identify, manage, and reverse the side effects that surface when subjected to situations that are just part of the job, as we like to say, just part of the job. In addition to his books, Bill creates correctional content on his YouTube channel called Just Corrections with William Young, where he currently has over 12,000 subscribers and over 1 million views from around the world. He's also appeared as a guest on several podcasts and presented wellness information at many agencies and conferences. And Bill's even appeared on the Dr. Phil Show. So we are very excited and happy to have Bill with us today. Welcome, Bill. Our next guest is a very special friend to everyone in corrections, Dr. Katerina Spinaris. Katerina is a licensed professional counselor, and she's the founding director of Desert Waters. In addition to overseeing operations at Desert Waters, Katerina develops wellness curriculum for public safety staff. She's authored 7 training courses to date, including the Desert Waters signature course From Corrections Fatigue to Fulfillment. CF2F, as we call it, received a huge honor in 2016 when it earned the Commercial Product of the Year Award of Excellence presented by the International Association of Correctional Training Personnel. Katerina has also created 2 correctional family wellness courses, and she's conducted groundbreaking research in the areas of post-traumatic stress and other mental health issues related to corrections work. She helped design the Desert Waters one-of-a-kind staff wellness accreditation program entitled Safety Net Accreditation. And as if that's not enough, she takes time to answer vent-line emails sent to her by staff and families from across the country. And she enjoys putting together the Desert Waters educational publication, The Correctional Oasis. The Oasis is available every month for free through the Desert Waters website. In 2014, Katerina received the Colorado Criminal Justice Association's coveted Harry Tinsley Award, and she has also authored several books, including Staying Well, Strategies for Corrections Staff, now in its 3rd edition. So a quick reminder, all the Desert Waters books and access to the monthly Correctional Oasis are available online at desertwaters.com. Please check it out. It really is my pleasure to welcome one of the first people I ever met who genuinely cared about corrections staff and their wellness, and my very good friend, Katerina Spinaris. Welcome, Katerina.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's such an amazing moment for me to be with you guys, because I was sharing with Brent that I feel like the accidental correctional person because I've never worked in a correctional environment of any type. I've just sat and listened and watched and then taught correctional people and family members, did some treatment clinically. So all my experience has been from really listening to you folks and doing some research and listening to the data. And I've been sort of like drafted back in 2002 to start Desert Waters. And we started it as a 501c3 nonprofit in Colorado in 2003. And in a little cow town called Florence, Colorado, in a county that had, at the time, 12 prisons and 1 jail. And immediately around us were another 5 prisons. So we have been in an area that has been saturated with correctional people. So I am here to chat with Bill, and it's been a very precious connection to me, and kind of we're partners in stirring up stuff. And yeah. And actually it's so nice to find somebody on the same page in terms of advocacy, because really what we do at Desert Waters is educating, equipping staff and family members, but also a lot of advocacy to people who don't know what the impact of their job is. And so we stir the pot in terms of needing to act to make things better. And so that's what we're going to be talking with Bill about. And we entitled this webinar, Keeping the End in Mind, because we really want to focus on where are we going, this whole wellness journey, because right now it's kind of like almost a fad to be doing wellness stuff. Like, what is this about? And ultimately, the end in mind, when I think about it, and when I consider what I learned also when I went to Norway a couple of years ago to look at their prison system, thanks to One Voice United, it's about looking at the entire system and improving it. You cannot just change one part and not change the other. The whole thing needs to be addressed. So that's the end in mind, that we have to think holistically and as a system and look at every stakeholder and every participant and how can we make it better for them. Our calling at Desert Waters is the staff. Other people's calling is the incarcerated, the probations, the parolees. Our deal is the staff. But we know that everything we do trickles down to the rest of the system. So we're here to talk back and forth and enjoy and then answer questions. And Brent, you have anything more you want to add before we take off?
Yes, thank you, Katerina. Before we get started with our questions, I'd like to invite everyone to visit the Desert Waters website at desertwaters.com, and there you can learn about the products and services. You can check us out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and if you missed any part of today's webinar, you can find it on the Desert Waters YouTube channel very soon. So we have a lot of people participating online, so we'd like everyone to feel free to post questions in the chat box. And then at the end of our discussion, Bill and Katerina will answer as many questions as they can. We plan to finish on the hour, but we'll stay longer to cover those questions. So let's get started. If Bill and Katerina are ready, I've got kind of a simple question to start off. It's probably a question that's more complicated than it sounds, but what is correction staff wellness anyway? What's that mean?
Okay. Well, yeah, Brent, it is a complicated question because wellness means everything and nothing, right? And wellness is so specific to the individual who needs something, who has an unmet need that we need to fill, right? And so for me, my mission has been to educate and to say, look, wellness is not about just saying, hey, we're going to have a couple of resiliency trainings here and there. We're going to do some online learning for you later, and maybe put a peer support team together so that this person will, be okay and show up for work, and we don't have to worry about overtime and staffing a post, right? For me, wellness in the correctional space is a life or death thing. We are talking about saving the lives of the people that are willing to die for your agency's mission statement. We're talking about helping people salvage their marriage and their relationships with their kids and living healthier and more meaningful existences. So when you talk about wellness in this space in particular, and that's what's different. I had an opportunity to speak in front of our county board a year ago about this. And, it's great that, private companies like Amazon and Patagonia and they do wellness, and that's great. To me, the stakes are higher in the correctional space. To me, the difference between a bad day for somebody who works in this environment is a lot different than a bad day for somebody who works in the office. And I understand that stress is subjective and all that, but by the time a correctional officer or a correctional staff member reaches out and says, yeah, I do need some help, they're really way past that point. And so that's why it's so important to, when we say we're addressing wellness, that we actually, the people that are saying, okay, yeah, go do this, actually understand, what can happen if we don't do this right. And so for me, wellness is it's to sum it up, Brent, in 2 words, which I'll never do, right? I just talk forever. Saving lives. That's what wellness is in the correctional space.
Excellent.
Right. So to follow up on that, It's because it's such a taxing, sucking life out of people work situation a lot of times, that the measures have to be pretty drastic also, and they have to be relentless just as much as stress is relentless. And it has to be from all kinds of angles. That's why we put together the Safe Net accreditation program, not to just look at one thing and do one thing and think it's good, we're good to go, we check the box, let's move on. It has to be such a concerted effort, or it doesn't get there. It won't make a dent. It's like trying to swim up Niagara Falls, good luck. See you later.
Right.
And it has to be a much, you have to have some kind of massively strong engine, whatever, to do it. And so to me, it's like saying, whoa, this is hugely needed. And sadly, I mean, you cannot function like you want to function as an agency if you have people that are impaired, basically. They're broken down, they have had their life sucked out of them, they can barely keep it together, and they are so sleep deprived they walk into walls. It's like we have to do something, or else we're kidding ourselves that we are going to accomplish the mission of the agency. It cannot happen with broken down people. So that's where Bill and I are completely on the same page, and we're saying, whoa, the house is on fire. The house is on fire. Let's put it out. Don't say it's fine. It's not fine.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's why what you said is so profound. It's so important to, because the agency can purchase books, right? And that's great. And we love that. The agency can bring in, CF2F. The agency can bring in me to lecture. They can have a peer support team, but the bottom line is, because of our training, because of our environment, because it's pushed us all into survival mode, because the idea that the environment has changed us and that we are broken is such a hard pill to swallow that we reject that idea. And so wellness, like you said, has to be injected into everything that we do and say, from the onboarding to the retirement of the individual.
right.
Every policy, every procedure, every action that we take needs to be with the emotional health and psychological safety of that staff member in mind. And I think that's where we miss the boat.
Yes, yes, because people want to be able to check the box nicely and simply and say, oh, or we have no budget line item for wellness. We'll just do whatever is free. Drive me bananas when people say, what are free products? Like, these people are giving you their lives. Please let's not do free products only. I mean, they are good, but we need a more concerted effort, a lot more thoughts to be thought into it. And I was thinking about the Norwegian model. They had the same situations you guys were having here in the United States back in the 1950s. And they said, it's not working. We're turning people out worse than they came in. So they decided to bite the bullet and invest huge amounts of money into reimagining and rebuilding their prison system. And today they are the model, even though they have their own problems, because prison is prison. No matter what you do, it's not paradise.
Right.
They are so much better. They're the model for all of us. And people are envious, but it didn't happen by mistake. It happened by administrators, legislators saying, this is the reality, and this is what it will take to fix it. There are no shortcuts. And we're going to look at it as investment, not as wasting money, investing in the system. Go ahead, Bill.
And we do that with everything else that we do, right? You talked about the house being on fire. We have fire extinguishers. We do fire drills. We put fire evacuation plans on the walls. We, in corrections, prepare for what's the absolute worst case scenario, except when it comes to our staff. We just tell them to get in, do the job. We train them, right, to survive the moment, the call, the environment. The problem is, and what we're learning, and we know plenty about now, it shouldn't shock anybody that being waterboarded, being surrounded by trauma, and I'm going to steal this from your book, right? You're surrounded by evil all the time, trauma, all this craziness, and to think that it doesn't affect an employee, to think that you can just, the people say, well, we have to have rehabilitation programs for the incarcerated. We have to do this. We have to make sure that when they get back out, they're productive members of society. But for staff, you put them in an environment where they're forced to survive, to find whatever coping mechanism that they can. You chew them up, then you spit them out and expect them to do what? They don't have any skills. They don't have anything. They can't function in the real world. They can't even hang around their neighbors anymore. So you have to. It's not that we don't like spending money in corrections, because we waste a ton of money on stuff, right? We have every agency right now has probably 25 or 30,000 masks sitting in a box in some storeroom that they're never going to use again, right? So let's can we take some of that and say, hey, you know what? If we invest back into staff, if we invest into their wellness, now it'll be like doing an oil change on a vehicle, so we don't got to replace the motor later. So that person will show up to work. So that person won't sue us because they can't mentally do the job anymore. So they, God forbid, don't do anything drastic. I mean, we are already doing things to prevent other tragedies. All we have to do is shift a little bit of that energy and resources over to this, and it would make a huge difference in the lives of correctional staff.
Yep. And I read somebody's assessment, and she said something profound. I forget the name of the researcher. She said about the catch-22 correctional, especially line staff, find themselves in, that they're put in a position where they feel like they're a warrior because of the way it is, like we're outnumbered 1 to 100, 1 to 80, whatever. And their pride and the sense of worth comes from being able to keep it together, being able to manage that incredibly taxing, crazy environment. So it's very hard for somebody who puts their whole sense of worth into, I'm able to face 100 people per day that maybe wanted to kill me, and make it out okay, for them to say, I'm affected, I'm quote unquote broken. And it's an injury to their ego. So they don't want to say, they say, I'm fine, right? The typical, I call the I'm good code of silence. And because it's their whole sense of meaning and worth about what they do every day is about survival. And so it makes it really, really hard for them to say, I have been affected negatively, I'm hurting. And also then you have the real other fears, like if I say that I'm broken or hurting or whatever, I won't get considered for promotions, or I will be considered unfit for duty, and I will lose my right to carry a gun, I will lose my job. And it's like, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm hurting. Are you kidding me? Over my dead body, so to speak. And that's what sometimes happens. Suicide happens because people won't say, this thing bested me, this thing broke me. And we're trying to come in and say, you know what? It would be impossible for a human being to not be broken under what you have been through.
Right.
And kind of de-shame the whole thing and say, who in the right mind could survive those years of relentless whatever pummeling, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually? Who could survive unscathed? Nobody. You'd have to be a robot.
No, if you
concrete.
and that's what I try to do. I try to come in and say, look, I am you and you're full of shit. Like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're feeling. I put on the uniform. I'm a tough guy too, but I also know that I'm scared to death, right? I also know that I had to create a persona to survive in this environment because you told me to go in and deal with 100 inmates, but you told me to tell them when to go to their rooms, but you didn't really tell me what to do with the emotions that I feel when they say, hey, we're not going. What are you going to do? And now I have to sort through that. And now I'm scared because I have a mortgage to pay and I have a family to feed, and I can't quit because I don't know what else to do. Nobody's going to pay me to do what I'm doing now. Right. And so that's what I'm talking about, the education piece, to come say, hey, look, we're going to teach you to be warriors. But part of that is that you are going to change. And the truth of it, the dirty secret for whoever's listening and whoever's on this call, is that we're all falling apart inside. Now, it's not just job related, right? That's what people say. Oh, it's not just the job. Every one of us on planet Earth has experienced some form of grief, anxiety, stress, whatever it is, right? And corrections doesn't make that better. And so you're standing in a day room and you're stressed, but your chest puffed out, and that's okay. What I can do is my part, what line staff need to do, and all the cool kids in the agencies need to do, is to take that stigma, which is starting to break down, because agencies are pretending to want to do stuff about wellness, right? They're bringing people in, they're starting this conversation. And so this is great. This is our opportunity to say, hey, no, you said we could talk about this. Now, me as a veteran, I'm going to come in and say, oh yeah, I'm messed up and I'm scared and I've yelled at my kids and I've isolated myself from the world, and so have you. And I know you have, because we've been shoulder to shoulder for 2 decades. I know you have. So quit saying that you're not affected. And here's the beauty of it. People are dealing with it. They're just dealing with it in maybe not the best or healthiest ways, right? And so I had an officer, for example, say, this place doesn't bother me. I go like on 6 or 7 vacations a year. I take time off, and that's how this place doesn't bother me. I said, what you're doing is something intentional. You have something to look forward to. You're using this as a vehicle to go out and live your life. That is dealing with it. You are doing that because the stress of the environment requires a counterbalance. That's what you're doing. And so what I try to do, Katarina, is you are very polished and you are very nice and people like you. And I come in and I flip the table over and say, hey, assholes, you need to listen to what this lady's saying. You need to listen to what your wife is saying, what your husband is saying, what your kids are saying. And in my case, it was even what the inmates are saying. The inmates were coming up to me and saying, dude, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing's wrong with me. What's wrong with you, bro? But then I sit back and reflect and said, you know what? I've known for years that something's wrong with me, that something was off. But I couldn't put my finger on it because we were never taught to look at what was happening around us. I was a really good correctional officer, right? I was a shit husband. I was a terrible father. And it's because I was a great correctional officer, right? And I'm not saying that this is just my experience, and I'm just going to tell you how it is for me. And people automatically want to separate and get defensive, and that's fine. My experience doesn't have to be your experience, right? And you talk about that in your course, how the environment affects you on a continuum, right? I'm not just happy-go-lucky or I'm crying in a closet. There's all sorts of changes that occur. The fact is, every single person changes. So when we're talking about the wellness and what's our objective here, Katarina, my objective is to come in and say, look, these are the principles. These are the things that we teach you to do. So you can stop saying this job hasn't changed me, because the job did intentionally change you. We did. You had to change to survive this environment. You have done things in your career that your neighbor who works at a bank cannot do, because we taught you to do that. And because we taught you to do those things, there are some side effects. And hey, maybe we should look at those. So that's the piece for me, right? The end goal for me is that every person that puts on a uniform, that works in a correctional facility, that is married or friends or involved with correctional staff, understand that the environment that they work in will change them. That's it. And then, based on how that change affects you, that dictates what you have to do from there.
And ideally, we need to have preventative measures, things put in place. Like I was looking up how many hours airline pilots are allowed to rest versus work. It's like in the US, it's 8 hours of work and 16 hours of rest. And we need to have some things in place preventatively to protect people. Because, for example, we know sleep deprivation will undo a human being any creature, by the way, any animal, every single time. And so we need to put things in place. We have all kinds of laws and mandates and statutes about taking care of the incarcerated. We need to have the same for the staff, about limits, about how much can they take, about statutes, regulations, whatever, about whatever they're dealing with, preventatively, not wait till the bottom falls out and then try to patch somebody up. So that's my take. And that's part of what costs money, putting those things in place ahead of time and not a Band-Aid later. So
Excellent.
So that's why we're here, to stir things up and say, whoa, we need to, and look at them. And a lot of people's hands are tied. I know a lot of administrators who want to do more and they can't. They have no budgets given to them. They're not given the green light and they're stuck. And so many of them tried, I mean, several I know personally who said before they retired, they wanted to become an instructor of our CF2F course to give something back before they left. And it kind of touches me every time when they say, I want to give back the last 2 years, 3 years of my career, wardens, associate wardens, you name it. I want to give back to my people because I know they're bleeding on the carpet for us. And it means a lot to me. So we need this concerted effort. We need to all our streams, our rivulets, kind of become one big river and join and say, whoa, we need to acknowledge that we're putting people through it like a meat grinder. And we cannot expect them to come out the same way they came in. And you need to put some things in place. Sorry for the graphic image, it just hit me right now. But so we that's what we're trying to say. And we've listened, and I'm sure you have, Bill, too. So many family members crying, like, what happened to you? Parents, I don't recognize my kid anymore.
I got a message from the wife of a correctional officer a few years ago, and the message was that her husband had he had taken his own life, and I called her and we spoke about kind of how it went down, and the response of the agency was to move that individual from segregation to a dorm, and that should be less stressful. But anybody who's ever worked in a facility, the dirty secret is that segregation is pretty controlled, and unless you're having a shit night, it's probably okay. Dorms are like, forget it, put the rookies in the dorms. So that wasn't helpful. And here we have this woman who is now by herself. She's getting ready to have her first child, and we dropped the ball on this. And I say we because the it's no surprise that corrections is crazy. It's no surprise that the environment that we work in is crazy. But to speak to you talking about the people's whose hands are tied, you're right. But we all have power in our position to do something to push this wellness initiative forward. And so when you're talking about staff working 16 hours, in fact, I was on the phone with New York yesterday, and she made a comment about double shifts or triple shifts. Here's my question. Is it administration's idea for staff to work 16 hours, or is it the union leadership and legislators that are allowing that? Because it's somebody's responsibility. Somebody can step up and say, hey, okay, we did this because we had to do it, right? That's kind of the history of like society, right? We were doing things for a while. We realized maybe that was not the right way to do things. Now let's change things. Just take the sleep aspect. If you're not sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night, there's some serious health problems no matter what else you're doing, right? What are we sleeping? 3 to 4 hours a night? And is that even good sleep, right? So if you do everything else correctly, but you don't allow your body to rest, you're still going to have some health complications, right? So can we say, you know what? We're not working 16 hours anymore. That is insane. We are contributing to burnout just by that. Can we just figure out how to work that piece in? Can we take that out? Now, I don't know whose role that is, right? But we'll get into that a little bit more, but everybody, just keep in mind, like everybody has a role in the safety and security of the facility when you come inside, no matter what your station is. Wellness is not just your boss's responsibility. Wellness is not just, the wellness coordinator or the traveling presenter that's going to drop a class on you. That's not what it is. It's everybody's responsibility, your responsibility. So
so the thing is that we need like some heavy duty medical experts to show up and talk to legislators about the effects of what they call partial chronic sleep deprivation. It's partial because it's not a whole night. You get 2 or 3 hours of sleep, but it's partial and it's chronic. It goes on for years for some people. It's been going on for really way before COVID. And people need to have hardcore data and said it's inhumane. In fact, my friend, dear friend, Greg Morton talked about being a human rights violation to not let people sleep on a regular basis. It's like torture, seriously. And we know it does everything from heart disease to diabetes to Alzheimer's. Like, hello, crashes on the way home. Like, it should be illegal. I mean, seriously, it is like inhumane. It's torture. So
Right.
we need to have some heavy duty boots on the ground that say, no, this is not right. And it should be not allowed. The same thing with airline pilots. And I'm sure truckers have regulations too.
Mhm.
So there's got to be something. You guys are not robots. They're your human beings. And that's where I get really distressed. Here we go. All righty. Thank you.
That's in response to the chat right there. I got the boots. My boots are right here.
Okay. So we need those kind of, like somebody put down, national standards. We need that. We need something. We need that strong advocacy. We need to say, this is not acceptable. This is not right. These are not expendable people. These are human beings like the rest of us, and they have value, and we cannot put them through inhumane working conditions. Figure out some other way to deal with the shortage, but we can't kill their people doing their work and have heart attacks in the middle of their shift.
So you guys have said a lot. Obviously, you've covered a lot of ground. And we see this when we go out to train. For a lot of corrections staff, they've been surviving. Like Bill says, they're surviving, so they don't even recognize some of the problems that they're dealing with, almost as just part of the culture. But I think sometimes they're as surprised by it, but the people that make the decisions on where to allocate money and what to focus on aren't necessarily in those classes. So that kind of takes me to my next question, for Katerina and Bill. I know you're pushing this movement and it's made headway. We've come a long ways. I can tell you from my own career, we've come a long, long ways. But what have been some of the challenges you've faced out there, just getting your foot in the door and getting the conversation going, and then maybe later really getting some change to happen? What are some challenges?
Well, I mean, briefly, when I showed up, I was and I am a nobody. I mean, I'm just a little human being here that has no connections, no political connections, no inside connections, no history, the military or corrections or law enforcement or anything. Coming up and saying, you know, the job really, the way it's being done right now, it really causes damage to the worker. And actually all the way up to wardens, they have huge stressors they're dealing with also. And with no tools, and like who are you to tell us that our staff are not doing well? Like, who are you? So that was the first big challenge. Like, who are you? The credibility. That's why we needed to do the studies to have numbers, and then the whole thing of seismic shift. Like, whoa, if we acknowledge that, then we have to do X, Y, Z, and on it goes. So, and I was looking, by the way, I was looking up the whole thing of the black lung disease of coal miners with coal dust. And it was first recognized in the 16th century. And things did not start getting put in place to protect the workers till 1969, from the 16th century. Like, wow, my jaw dropped. I mean, like, are you kidding me? And still being fought on certain grounds. So the resistance to change, and people not wanting to invest a bunch of funds, probably, or not thinking they didn't have funds, but not seeing that you cannot do the job like a carpenter, cannot build nice cabinets with broken down tools. Like, pragmatically, realistically, you have to have tools in shape if you're going to get the job done well. You cannot cut corners around that reality. So, but Bill, I'm sure you have stuff to share also.
Actually, yeah, you said, hey, I'm nobody. I just come in from the outside and I have this beautiful research and this beautiful message to tell people, and they don't want to listen. So here I am from the inside saying, hey, I want to share some information with you guys. I have this beautiful life-saving, life-changing, career-extending information that I think you should check out. And they say, well, so So it's the same. So I actually give a presentation called 5 Reasons That Your Wellness Program Is Going to Fail. And Katerina, I had the opportunity to publish that in the Correctional Oasis, which I appreciate, caused a lot of backlash. But and so there's several things, right? But the main things that I've seen is the correctional culture and institutional practices. It's because we've always done it this way. We've always, and jail is jail and prison is prison, and there's always fires to put out. And so it is very hard to turn that thing around. It to even shift. And so my experience, and other agencies will probably find a similar experience. There's a hot topic, there's a hot thing. Here comes wellness. We're going to do this. We're going to have a new policy come out, a new directive, and 2 weeks later, it's like it never existed. And so when you take a group of correctional officers that you trained and told not to trust anybody ever, and then you threw them in an environment where they had to protect their personal information and be careful of everything they say because it was a life or death situation, and then you come out and say, hey, trust me, trust this employee assistance program, hey, trust this. No way. You've got to spend the time to undo what you just said. It took 300, 400 years to make a difference. You've got to undo everything you just did. You have to now kill the monster that you helped create. And the problem is, and then one of the main problems is then our follow through in the correctional business. We don't follow through. Because we have things that we have to handle today. This person's got to go to court today. This is a medical emergency right now. This inmate was killed right now. This staff was assaulted right now. There's things that we have to do right now. And how am I supposed to address this? I have to do this now. And so this topic, wellness, the idea, and I'm really starting to hate the name, the wellness. I think we need to rebrand that somehow, because it shouldn't be a side. It shouldn't be the side salad to the appetite, the steak. We have to have somebody in place in every agency that pushes this initiative forward. Somebody that's going to be able to go to those administrators who were maybe never us, that were never impacted and affected by the agency, or are so far removed from the actual jobs and needs of the people that are doing the job, that can come up and say, hey, don't send that email. Don't say that way. Or, hey, this officer, so for an example, we had an individual that tried to self-harm, and it affected the staff member. The staff member said, hey, I don't feel like I can be in this area anymore. I need a couple days. I said, great, let's do that. So I set it up and I said, hey, can we get this individual another post just for a few days? Yeah, great, no problem. I come in the next day. The guy is in the adjoining housing unit, which is the same layout, the same smell, the same everything. And I'm like, what the hell, man? That's not a solution. Well, they didn't understand why we moved him from this housing unit to this housing unit. Why isn't that? Well, because the scenery is still the same. So education, somebody who can educate and articulate, hey, what we are doing is bad. It's contributing to these people's problems. And a small little adjustment can be made to really help that out. So for me, it's not finding those people in your agency and then allowing them to run wild. And I'm going to tell you, Katerina, years ago, you described me as a wild horse, somebody who gets out in the ditches and plows the field, and where the pretty show horses can't go. And I love that, because you need somebody in your agency that not only doesn't care about what anybody thinks about them when they say stuff, like but somebody who can go to administration and speak candidly, and just not go in there and raise hell, but go in there and be able to have a conversation and be able to articulate why people need the things that they need, and why we're doing the things that we're doing is actually contributing to the problems. So there's somebody in every facility. There's somebody who is passionate about their brothers and sisters and the people that they serve with in every facility. And this is where I say it's everybody's responsibility. I was sliding down a rabbit hole. I was spiraling, and I stumbled across Katerina and her beautiful material, and it turned a light switch for me. And I said, I've never heard about this. Like, we talked about this before the call. You know, here we are. You have this in your backyard. You don't even know what this is. I had never heard about this. Nobody had ever talked about taking care of yourself. And I said, well, somebody's got to do something. And I'm looking around and I'm like, well, I guess it's got to be me. So if you're in your agency and you're like, who's going to do this? Somebody should really do this. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're the person in your facility that's got to push this initiative forward. And so for me, those are the obstacles, right? We've always done it like this. And then you're so tired. You're so tired. You're so burnt out. You're so fed up, or you're so, I'm going to use the word ignorant, and I'm going to use that on purpose because I want people's attention. You're ignorant to the fact that the job has changed you and that you even need to do anything about it. And so for me, those are some obstacles that I've come across that I see among many others, but those are the ones that I kind of harp on and say, look, this is where we're at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to tack on to that, we have to be willing to pay the price, because there's a price to pay when you get involved. I'm sure you have gotten a few more white hairs, so to speak, Bill, since you started doing that, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was minding my business, running a private practice psychotherapy. I had no intention in a trillion years to do anything like what I'm doing now with Desert Waters Correctional Outreach. But it was this thing of seeing the need through my counseling sessions with correctional people or exes and retirees and people on the brink, talking them off the ledge, so to speak, in a few cases, and feeling the finger on me saying, you do something about it. And me saying, I'm not going, I have other stuff to do, and I'm not interested. I'm clueless. What are you
Right.
talking about?
Right.
And it's like, but eventually it became very clear that I'd better get off my duff and get involved. And yes, it takes a huge amount of effort, but that's where we need to help each other, help sustain each other, support each other, teach each other, communicate, equip, whatever, because it is a good fight. It is a good fight. And I really am not a fighter. I don't like picking fights, but it's like, it's worth it because there are all those people, all those families, all those children. Oh my goodness. It's like heart-rending. And ultimately all the incarcerated people too, because an SCO in a bad place is not going to be doing a good job at work in terms of quote unquote rehabilitation. They can't. It's impossible. So Brent, back to you.
Well, and I just want to say, everything you guys are saying is right. Obviously, you need to have somebody champion these programs in the facilities, agencies, and all that. What I do love about Katerina's programs, and I think Bill feels the same way, there's a lot we can do at our own level. And so we don't have to necessarily wait for somebody to fix us. And if we make some efforts of our own at our level and our sphere of influence, as we always say in Desert Waters programs, we can make a lot of progress. And that kind of takes me to my next question. Even though there's been challenges, obviously, has there been some progress made? And what's the good news?
Katerina, you want to go or do you want me to go?
We talk about progress made. My goodness, since because we started unofficially 2002, huge progress. People talking about things, acknowledging, from people saying there's no way I mean, I had a U.S. attorney tell me people don't get PTSD from working in a prison. I mean, and she said, you only get it from a war zone. I said that they are going to a war zone every day.
Right.
And so anyway, from that level of what you called ignorance earlier, Bill, to today's huge light years. I mean, we have made so much progress. People are acknowledging, people are almost wearing their PTSD diagnosis as a badge of honor, like a wounded veteran of wars, because they are. And so it's huge openness and acknowledgement, and nobody fighting that reality anymore. Now it's more about what do we do with what we know in terms of tackling it effectively and not just putting out fires after they start. Bill?
No, I think the the progress, it's funny because the last conference I attended to, the track was, what's the next steps? Well, we're still on step one, in my opinion, but the progress is that we're starting the conversation. Nobody quite knows what to do exactly about it because it's very complex, but we are having the conversation. And for me, some of I can see some people in the chat that are beautiful connections that I've made, Caitlin and John and Mary and all these people, and they are helping to push it forward. And just in my like grassroots level, and to talk to Brent and your sphere of influence and things like that, just a win for me was my agencies come to me or said, you know what, do your thing, and let us know what you need. That doesn't mean I get what I want all the time, but it means that that they're listening now, right? And so we had the need to develop a program or a protocol for when an employee didn't show up to work. They were supposed to show up to work. They didn't come to work. So they didn't answer the phone. So maybe they'll show up tomorrow. I said, oh, what if they're dead? What
Mhm.
if, what is this unusual for this person? Did they quit? Does anybody? So we created a policy that said, hey, these are the steps that we need to take when an employee doesn't show up for work. And we use it now. It's in play. So if an employee doesn't show up for work, we run down the thing. I get the phone call. We go through the thing. We send the sheriff, whatever it does. But things have been put in place now that are being used. They're not being used consistently, right? Because that's corrections. But they are being used. People are putting. I spoke in Omaha last year, a couple years ago, whenever it was, and I asked, a room of 200 people, how many people had peer support teams in their agency, and probably, I don't know, 20 out of 200 had them. That's now more and more people are discussing it, are talking about it, are trying to get peer support teams in place, even if they don't know why the hell they're even doing it. They just know that somebody said it. So we are starting to do things. What I would
Mhm.
what I would like to see, and why this is so, and I'm like so emotional about this whole deal, and I apologize for that, but what I would like to see is all of this energy and all of this passion that people have throughout our profession. Guys, if we could just all move in the same direction, if we can just all stand up at the same time and say, hey, look, um, this is not the way that we should be doing business anymore, we could change things quicker than they did the black lung thing for the coal people, right?
Yeah.
So that's my soapbox on that.
I think it's really common in corrections when something new comes along, they just think it's the flavor of the month and it's not going to last. But if we can really sustain it, we can change the culture. If it is the flavor of the month, it won't change anything.
Right.
It's got to last.
And
And
that's why
that's what you're
it
talking
has to be in everything that we say and do. So you
Oh,
can have great. My agency brings in Katarina and she trains everybody. Well, actually I would have Brent train everybody just because, Katarina can me and her are going to go to lunch every day. Brent, you got to do the work.
I got to do all right.
Brent, you come in, you train 500 people and everything's great. And we try to handle a situation. We have a fight, right? We have a fight and it's bad and the officer wants to step out, right? Well, everybody understands that, yeah, this job's stressful. Yeah, this job's crazy. Yeah, maybe this person should go home or step out, or we have a peer support team who's going to talk to him. But guess what? There's no policy governing that. There's no the person running shift, it doesn't believe in it, and so they're like, meh. Well, there's nothing that says I have to let you do that, so go back to work. So that's what I'm talking about. It has to. We can't just say that we want you to be well. We have to hold ourselves accountable, and we have to show you that we want you to be well. My director has a beautiful quote. It says, "You can't just pretend to be there, right? You can't just pretend to care." And that's what we see through that. You train correctional officers to sniff out bullshit. So when you're trying to be less than honest, or your efforts, we see the inconsistencies. You taught us to do that.
Yeah.
And so it has to be you gotta put the spices, in the dinner, in the chili when you're making it, right? This is just not the cornbread on the side. This has to be in everything that we do.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
And to attack again onto that, it's not just a big traumatic event, a big suicide that people come across in a cell, or an assault, a bloody whatever encounter. It's really the death by 1,000 cuts of the day-to-day stressors. When we talk about anti-correction fatigue, it's not just the traumatic stressors, it's the organizational and the operational one, interpersonal friction. And for a lot of staff, they say it's not the inmates, it's the staff that are draining me.
Right.
They're the ones that cause me the stress. So it's not just the big, that's why the whole thing of critical incident is really limited. It's very, very limited. And also people define critical incident differently. Like what's critical to me is not to you. But anyway, that's another story. But so we need to have acknowledgement of the 1,000 cuts effect that adds up day after day. Like one drop a day in a bucket with enough rain, boy, guess what will happen to the bucket? And eventually get full. So we have to acknowledge that wear and tear that is so silent and in the background, ongoing over and over, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. And add to that sleep deprivation, and you have people that are toast. And I saw the first ever survey out of Norway of their staff. And believe it or not, they have post-traumatic issues, they have anxiety issues, they have depression issues, they have fear to go to work issues. And they're just lower percentages than we have in the United States, because they have a lot less violence, a lot better conditions to work in. But they still have the stuff going on to them, the dark, pull of gravity that takes them down. And they're saying, I saw quotes that said, it's not just a big event, it's those little stressors every day that add up. So that's what we have to be cognizant of also. That's why people need to get away from work. That's why they cannot be there 12 and 16 hours a day and then function properly.
That's what got me, honestly, and that's why I wrote The Nothing That Never Happened. I met a correctional officer who was stabbed in the neck with a pencil, right? And listening to his experience, you can say, yeah, you got stabbed in the neck with a pencil. That's a problem. You're going to lose some sleep. You're going to have some long-term effects. And so here I am sitting there questioning my feelings, the validity of my feelings, because I've never been stabbed in the neck with a pencil, because I've never been seriously assaulted or put in the hospital. And I'm thinking, well, what's wrong with me? I'm not a warrior. I'm weak. I'm what is, and now I don't know where I'm at, because it can't be the job, right? Because nothing's ever happened to me. But that's a beautiful point that you made, and that's the awakening, right? And the key.
Mm-hmm.
You get to decide what's traumatic. You get to decide what's critical. You get to decide how it affects you. Nobody else gets to do that. And so if we can this is why I tell people, I say, if we can go to a birthday party with family and friends and balloons, and it's fun and the music's great and it makes us feel good, why can't the opposite be true? If I can listen to country music and at some point I buy a big belt buckle and some boots because country music had that big of an influence on me, then why wouldn't talking with murderers and rapists do the same thing? This is what blows my mind. We already have concrete example of how our environments. Let's take church. I love going to church. I love church people. I don't have to worry about them stabbing me, right? If people can go to things like that and feel good and happy, and we can say that, yes, certain environments do, wellness retreats, all these things that are meant to make us feel better, guess what? The opposite's got to be true. The opposite has to be true. Nobody, that's why people promote out and try to get out of the units as fast as they can. Nobody wants to work in a correctional facility. Robots should be doing this job, right? Because it affects you, and you know that. So let's just So let's just cut the crap and just say, okay, we can all acknowledge that, yes, maybe not to the extreme that it's affecting me and I'm a big crybaby and I had to write a couple books about it, right? But let's just say it affects me, and maybe we should have things in place to help people when they need it.
Yeah, or change the system entirely, like the good old Norwegian model. At this point, is 1 CO to 11 inmates. It used to be 1 to 9.
You know what?
1 to 9.
Yeah, but I talked to a guy who worked at a small county jail before he came to 16 inmates. And this is the problem. If one of those individuals decide you're not going home, you're not going home. And I spoke to our new hire class yesterday, and I did an illustration, and I said, what's your biggest concerns? And one drew a shank, and I went over to it and I said, hey, what can a shank be made out of? And they said, anything. And I said, who could use a shank to hurt you? Anyone. So if anything is a weapon and everybody's a threat, then how do you think we live our lives? It doesn't matter if there's 600 of them or 2 of them. Inside, we're freaking out. And then it gets to a point where we don't even acknowledge the freak out, right? Because our body does things that we can't control anyways, right? And then we convince her. And that's the thing. That's the whole deal, guys. Walking into a housing unit or a yard or walking the tier and having people lurking in the doorways, having people between you and your exit, having people surround you is nuts. It freaks you out. The only reason that we pretend it doesn't, because our life depends on it. Because we feel like if these guys on this call know that I'm scared, then they're gonna not come when I need them. Then they're gonna treat me in such a way that it forces me to leave, which means I can't feed my family. So I have to put on this persona. I create this Batman, right? I'm this crime fighter, this big badass, and I've done things in my career that make me cry when I think about it. And the only reason that I did them was because I was too scared not to. And that's what people need to start having conversations about, right? You're not as tough as you think you are. And if you're completely numb and you're having a great time and being around all this situation, then you're either oblivious to the actual threat, or you've conditioned yourself so well to suppress your emotions that you no longer feel anything. And that's the problem. I don't even know where I started on this rant, Brent. Maybe you can rein me back in, but that's what it is.
Well, you bring up a really good point, but I kind of want to end on this because I think if somebody has been listening to this webinar today, they might think that all of our stress comes from the offender population, which obviously a lot of it does. But sometimes we're our own worst enemy too. Our peers and our partners and the administration and the policies and the way we do business can cause stress and pile on top of what we're already facing in the cell house with the offender. So if you just speak to that just a little bit, if you don't mind, and then we'll wrap up and get to the questions.
Yeah, we're cannibals. We outside of our training department, the door said, I think it's from a cartoon or something. New cadets are friends, not food, right? And it's because of our culture, and it's because of I'm projecting my fears and my insecurities and stuff onto other people. This is part of it, right? Part of it is I feel like I'm a victim because I'm in survival mode and I'm in this environment that I can't get out of, right? And administration doesn't care about me and I'm all by myself and my life's in danger all the time. And so I've created this attitude. And I have to channel that energy somewhere. And so I turn it on a staff who I deem is weak or ineffective at what they're doing. And so when I say, and this is what bothers people, right? Because I got into a discussion with a person who runs a social media page not too long ago, who asked, does administration care about staff? Well, the answer is no. If you're talking to a correctional officer, a group of correctional officers, nope, it's torches and pitchforks, and they don't give a shit about it. They don't know what I do or nothing. That's probably not the truth, right? And then I say, well, here's the deal. We don't even care about us. We don't even treat each other with respect. Because here's the deal. When we're all sitting around shift and and something happens and an alarm happens, we don't start running when the administrator gets there, when the warden shows up. We don't not do tasks because we're waiting for 30 people to start and be trained. No, we do things to survive the shifts and the things that we got to do right now. So here's what I'm saying. If your agency doesn't see the importance of wellness, if they don't see the importance of appreciating and recognizing and respecting staff in the way that they need, then you do it. Then your unions do it. Then as a shift, you do things. If you don't want to eat the free hot dogs that your administrators give you because you don't trust where it came from, then provide your own hot dogs. Then you pick up the phone when another officer needs you instead of stigmatizing their behavior because you're afraid of how others will see you for being receptive to what they're doing. Right? Well, I had a situation where I'm in an office, we're talking, and an officer is disclosing they just came back from hospital duty. They watched an inmate die. They watched an inmate take their last breath. Okay. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever seen anybody die, but it's really weird, right? It's a thing. Okay. And this officer is getting emotional, and this officer is disclosing to the people that he trusts to save his life how he feels about this. And our big belly, salty veteran correctional officer whose uniform is faded, probably hasn't been washed in 2 weeks, says, "Did you tell him you'd see him in hell?"
Oh,
How stupid is that? First of all, that's not even funny. I mean, correctional officers are funny people. Our humor, we should have our own Netflix special, right? So for correctional standards, that's not even funny. But that is an immediate shutdown of that person's emotions. If you don't care about it and you don't think, then that's fine. Just don't say anything. That's what my mom used to say. If I don't have something nice to say, don't say nothing at all. So don't say nothing at all. This officer, and we lost that officer. He doesn't work for us anymore. Could we have taken that officer aside and said, you know what? Let's talk about it. It is weird. You know what? Matter of fact, I had a similar situation and I'm still not okay with it. I still lose sleep. Here's employee assistance program. Nope. Instead, we have someone say, "Suck it up, dude. You got go give this housing unit a break because they need to heat up their food so they can eat it in front of 65 people." That's what we
right.
do. We do that to ourselves. That has nothing to do with administration. That has nothing to do with legislators. We can sit on our hands and wait forever for somebody to save us, or we can save ourselves. Jail
Don't
will
start.
be jail. Prisons will be prisons. Policies take forever to change. Listen, if you've ever sit in on an administrative meeting, they have meetings about having meetings, right? It's crazy.
That's true.
They are doing things. People are trying to move the needle. But we cannot afford to sit and wait for somebody to help us anymore. We have to do things to help each other.
Right, right. And one of my CO friends said to me, our compassion button is broken. So our compassion button needs to be fixed to each other and then towards the rest of humanity. And we know why it's broken. We talk about that correction fatigue training, but still it needs to be fixed. And if you don't have compassion, yes, you don't have glue for humans to bond to each other. So thanks, Bill. I really appreciate your examples. And I know we went a little over, but it's a pretty intense topic.
Yeah.
And yes, we can do it. All can do something. We all can do something. We all can do something, no matter how small or big. We all can do something towards bettering things.
And we are at the end of our hour. So we're going to stay online and answer some questions. So if you don't have to go, please hang around. We're going to stay online. Before we do move to audience questions, I want to mention next month's webinar on Thursday, September 26th. Our webinar is called Retirement, Exit Strategies and Adjustments. And Dr. Spineris, Katerina will be your host, and she'll be joined by a panel of correctional retirees, Dr. Susan Jones, Steve Howarder, and myself. So we'll have a good discussion about what retirement looks like for corrections people. Watch for some details on that. If you're looking forward to retirement or even retired, this one's for you. So let's move on to some questions. Want to make sure we cover some here. Let's see. Justin has sent me some. Here's one that says, how do you maintain a family life when your schedule is all over the place and no set days off? You can only miss so many family events before family gets used to operating without you. What would we say to that person?
I would say that I'm the Rocket Man. That's read Ray Bradbury's The Rocket Man. And that's one of the reasons that this information is so important, because even when you're there, you're not there. And your family, I can tell you firsthand that my wife has learned to live without me. My kids have learned to live without me. Even now that I'm back on a regular schedule and I've been around, I can't undo 15 years of not being there. And it's not because they didn't understand that I was providing for the family. It's not that they're angry with me. It's just that I wasn't there to weigh in on dinner. I wasn't there to help with homework. I wasn't, and I'll tell you, and it wasn't until I started on this journey that I realized even when I was there, I wasn't there. And if we can, that's why this, somebody put in the comments about it's a great message, but don't cuss so much. But here's the problem. This is personal for me. This is not something that I decided, hey, I'm bored, I have some extra time, let's talk about correctional wellness. This is something that takes place in my living room and in the living room of thousands of correctional officers. And if I have to disclose, if I have to discuss, if I have to use some language that gets people's attention, then that's what I got to do. Um, how I have found it to be helpful is to communicate, is to sit down with my wife and say, hey, I'm not okay. And part of my job and the stresses of my job may come home with me. And because of that, I may need to do some things. I may need to not go to your sister's tonight. I may need to sit in silence for a while. I mean, I just came home the other night. I had a terrible day. I came home the other night and I started talking because I want to share. And then I got to a point where I didn't want to talk anymore. And I told my wife, you know what? I don't want to talk about it anymore. I want to go to dinner. Can we just please go somewhere? And that's the key, right? To communicate what you need right now. And it's okay to even say, hey, I don't know what I need. Right. And so that's another small change that happens for correctional staff that they don't understand. Your schedule. You work every Christmas, birthday, holiday, weekend, night, all the time, forever, for the rest of your life. I haven't celebrated an anniversary on my anniversary in 20 years. But what we did is we had the conversation to say, babe, I'm never going to get Christmas off, ever, ever. I'm not going to be ordered because nobody's ever sick on a holiday, but I'm not going to be able to get Christmas off. So what my family did is we said, okay, let's do Christmas on the morning of the 24th, because I could always get the 24th off. Nobody cares about that day. Mm-hmm. And so I had to understand that, hey, yeah, my anniversary falls on a Friday. That's cool. The restaurants are less busy on my day off anyways, on Wednesday. Let's just do that. It's not about, it's totally about adapting and acknowledging that there is something that we have to do different. We're different than other families. My family's different than other families. We don't get to do things, and my wife has had to show up to places alone and things like that. And she just laughs and says, my husband's in jail. But that takes both people openly communicating and being willing to share their feelings and support each other no matter what. And so being flexible, and just don't shut down. Don't shut down. Keep talking. For me, that's been the key.
Right. Being vulnerable and sometimes learning how to talk. That's why I've had people say they had to go to therapy to learn how to communicate, because they didn't know what they felt. They had no idea. They've never asked themselves how they felt. Right. And they didn't know how to be vulnerable. They felt ashamed about being vulnerable. And there's a very beautiful poem, mini chapter in your When Home Becomes a Housing Unit, called I'm Tired. You entitled I'm Tired. Just starting with that and saying, look, this is about me. it touches me every time I've read it. When you just say, I'm tired, I'm just tired. And letting somebody know I'm spent, I'm exhausted. Just hold me for a while, or don't touch me for a while, whatever
Right.
it might be.
If I might just interject a little story of my own too. I was a bit of a workaholic when I was inside, spent too many hours inside, came home, brought work home with me sometimes. And I had a 6-year-old daughter who wasn't getting enough dad time. She slipped me a little note one day in her little handwriting that said, Daddy, when can we play? I love you. And that told me everything I needed to know about work.
Right.
That prison, that jail, that will be there forever. Your home life will not. You need to take care of home life. And if that means changing positions at work, if you can, putting in for transfers, promoting, maybe not volunteering for overtime, doing what you can to keep your job, obviously, but doing what you can to keep that balance at home, because that's what's really important, is that balance at home.
Right.
And those years are numbered. Those years are numbered with your children, especially. So take advantage of that. We've got a couple other questions about burnout. How can we implement burnout leave? Or there was another question here I was reading about what to do about burnout when you are so exhausted and overwhelmed.
And again, all these are reactive measures. It's like after the horse left the barn, as they say in the country. So that's why I'm so big on doing preventive things and putting these in place from the get-go and having those policies. Some places have stress leave, and that's what they call the stress leave. It's where people go to their physician or a psychotherapist, whatever, and they get paperwork completed that they need a break. But the thing to me, that's again reactive, and it's kind of like after the horse left the barn. We need to put something in place so that doesn't happen again 3 months down the road, and 3 months down the road after that. Like, what do you do to try to minimize and reduce and prevent? And by the way, trying to create those work conditions where they are more positive will also make the agency more attractive for people to want to work there. And people need to get that. It's like you're going to make it more inviting for people to show up, so you don't have this terrible short staffing going on. So anyway, go ahead.
I would say no, and you're right, Katerina. And I would say that if you're burned out now, if you're hitting the wall now, just stop for a second. Just stop
Mhm.
and just breathe. And what I've done and what's been so helpful, and my family teases me. They think I'm ridiculous because I do different things. I have different hobbies. One right now, my hobby is learning to make different kinds of coffee. I've kayaked. I've built furniture. I've done all kinds of things. And what it is trying to get my mind out of the institution. And so knowing what you need right now, and even if you don't need that, I talk to so many people. I say, well, what do you do to blow off steam? I go to the gym. Okay, well, is the gym still working? No. And then that's what scares them, because this thing that always worked is not working anymore. So you just try something else. It's like standing in front of the toothpaste aisle. There's 300 brands of toothpaste. Who cares? Just grab a tube of toothpaste. You don't like it, grab another one the next day. It's totally okay. If this isn't working today, then do something else. Go for a walk today. Read something today. And to Brent's point, your family and your well-being, I'm going to even switch it. Your health and well-being and your family's health and well-being are the most important things. You will figure out another way to make money if that is what it comes to. But you have to take care of yourself. And that's why this is so complex, because it doesn't, what's good for me doesn't work for you. And that's totally okay. But find that thing and then do it. And then figure out what your avenues are. At my facility, you just call in sick. It doesn't separate physical illness, mental illness, whatever, because a lot of states, they don't have legislation on the books for mental health yet. They're getting there, but they don't have it yet. So you just call in sick. Or here's a good start. Stop working when they can't force you to work. Don't work your weekends. If you don't have to be in the facility, don't be in the facility, psychos. Like, I know the money's good, but money can't walk your daughter down the aisle. I mean, that's the thing. So stop working when you don't have to. And then you can catch your breath and then engage in life and do all those things. So you're feeling a burnout. You're anxiety before shift, all your body and your mind are giving you these signs, right? Listen to them and just stop. There's a really cool story I heard about some Aborigines that they would travel and then they would just sit, and then they would travel and they would just sit. And the guy that was traveling with them said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "We're waiting for our souls to catch up with our bodies." And I think
Wow.
in corrections, for me personally, that has been so helpful because there are days that I don't know. It's like an outer body experience, and I have to just sit. I don't, sometimes the TV's on, sometimes it's not on, sometimes I have an open book in front of me, sometimes I'm just sitting, staring, but I need a chance to catch up with myself, to recenter myself, and then I can go back to the fight. But whatever works for you, do that. Don't worry about what anybody else says. My family, like, oh, dad's doing this now. Ha 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 ha. They don't understand. And that's okay. I don't need him to understand. I just need him to get out of the way. Right. And so whatever you need to do that. And then look, research, invest in yourself. Sign up for a training class, do a webinar, read a self-help book, whatever you do, find something that'll make you okay. And keep trying, keep fighting. Don't ever stop.
And this is a very big topic for survival, or what you can do within your power, because we all have to do something. So I'd like to talk also about, like, if you get bit by a rattlesnake, you have to have anti-venom, rattlesnake anti-venom to counter the bite. And consider the negativity of working in certain places, being bitten by a rattlesnake, and you need anti-venom. And that could be nature, could be some way of processing, like what you were talking about, Bill, processing what's happened, let your soul catch up with your body. I love that. This is processing, like, what happened? What am I feeling? What impacted me? How did it impact me? Why did it impact me? What's going on? Where am I at now? How do I see the world now as a result of whatever happened?
Right.
That's why journaling is so important. A lot of guys sneer at the thought of journaling, but I know others who are using it and they're saying it really helps. I mean, Bill obviously writes a lot, and for part of processing. So
That's how I started. I journaled stuff that pissed me off. And then I was like, okay, tough guy, what are you going to do about it? And then that's when I submitted my very first article ever. And I prayed to God that you would find some value in that babble. And the rest is history. But you're right.
and I loved it, right? I
Yeah.
loved it. I said, you send me more. Yes, please keep on writing.
Right.
Yes. So you need to process. Don't run away. That's why, guys, here is my little mini sermon. That's why alcohol is so nasty, because it will make you numb and you won't process it in a million years. If you're using alcohol to numb yourself and bear the moment, you cannot access those emotions. You can, unless they're exaggerated, extreme. You cannot access you lose you. You go behind the wall. And so we need to be able to feel and talk to people and be emotionally helped by somebody. That's why therapy can work very well too, or a good listening friend. And just hear yourself think and hear yourself feel. And don't just shove it around, not away. Now, the tricky thing is that when you only get 4 or 5 hours to be home and go to sleep, you obviously are going to push that aside because you're in survival mode trying to go to sleep and try to get up and go back to work the next day. That's why it's so self-defeating and so destructive to have all the mandatory overtime, because you don't have the luxury of processing anything. You're dying on the days off. You're sleeping 2 days straight if you have 2 days off.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. I think we've covered the questions that were forwarded to me. So we're going to go ahead and close.
Well,
I just want to thank.
let's see, Brent, let's
Hmm?
see. Is there anybody who wants to say anything else before we close? I mean, I'd like to hear the people who have been debating and were too shy to say something by now. Anybody wants to say anything or add anything, a comment, a thought, a question? Because we really appreciate you taking time.
I'm never
Dave,
too shy to say anything, but I think we cannot have meaningful discussion about wellness without really diving into culture, which we kind of touched on, and also with leadership. And I say this as a retired director of an agency. It always comes down to leadership. And it is the responsibility of a leader. And if you're not doing it, then you're not a leader. You might be a boss, but you're not a leader. And leaders are going to have to lead, and leaders are going to have to step up and push this as a priority and continue pushing it up as a priority and making sure that their people that they're responsible for get what they need. And you don't stop. And, you know, it's just, you've got to establish that. You've got to show the example. You know, you've got to talk about yourself, your own struggles. You've got to be willing to be human as a leader. And I'm not a super person. And I think we have to stress to staff, and I read a lot of stuff on, sometimes I I regret reading comments on social media posts. But they're enlightening, and how much, and this was touched on a little bit earlier about, you know, command staff doesn't care, leadership doesn't care. A lot of times they do. It's a tough job. Let me tell you, it's incredibly complex when you get higher up in there because there's so many priorities being thrown at you. But again, it's my responsibility to make sure that they know that you do care, you do listen to them. You can't give them everything you want. You do have limitations, but that you are really doing the best you can. And I think it's responsibility of everybody. One of the best books I wish I'd read before I retired was Extreme Ownership, Wellington Babin's book on extreme ownership. And they talk about leading up the chain of command. And you know, we learn about, we lead when we're at the top of the chain of command, but leading your leaders and making sure your leaders know what you need. And I know there's, looking back on my career, times when I said, hey, bosses, you know, we really need this. And you're like, yeah, well, you're not going to get it. And I walked away, you know, assholes, they don't care. They're going to give us. And I wonder now if I had more maybe I need to make my case better. Maybe I needed to continue making my case. Maybe I needed to continue pushing maybe a little more gently, and, you know, okay, this approach didn't work, maybe this one will. So, you know, keep pushing those at the top, keep making sure everybody knows that you're doing what you can and really do what you can and really do care. And those of you not at the top, keep pushing these ideas up to the top.
I like what you said there, but I also feel like, again, this is why I push everybody. It's everybody's responsibility, and I can tell you that line, I feel, I'm going to speak for, you know, thousands of correctional officers here, but that we don't feel appreciated. And so even when a director or a warden or somebody says, hey, I care, this is important. In fact, I went and spoke at an agency one time, and the director came before me and said, hey, everybody listen up. This is important to me. It's important for you. And you know, we went to great lengths to bring this guy here to you, and you should listen. And as soon as he left the room, I said, I apologize for that, because they were rolling their eyes. Their body language. They were like, we don't. There are staff that, and when we say you don't care, it doesn't mean that you don't care because you just, I don't care. It's you don't understand. If an issue is not personal to you anymore, it's hard for you to give it the level of concern that it needs. And my whole thing and my message is this, right? Like, I get that there's meetings. I get that there's red tape. I get that there's things that take time. And I can appreciate that now, being able to look through a wider lens. But if you would have told, and I'm going to be honest with you, dude, listening to that, I can appreciate it, but there's a piece in me, a fire in me, that would have exploded 4 years ago if I would have heard that. I would have, as a line staff who hasn't slept in 3 years, I would have said, this is the same crap that I always hear. But now I understand that I do have the power to control my own happiness. I do have a choice whether I work for you or not. I am in absolute control of everything that happens to me. And so you can say what you want. You can send the email that you want. It is not going to change my desire to be happy and healthy. And it's not going to change the way that I interact with staff. It will help if you help. Just like if a director wants that initiative pushed and a director says, this is our number one priority, that he or she will not be able to accomplish anything if line staff don't get on board. If the middle management does not relay that message, that will die. And that's what happens in correctional facilities. So I truly wholeheartedly know that leadership cares about their staff, even if it's just because they want them to show up to work. The problem is, as a leader, right, as a director, how many times can you tell staff, hey, we appreciate you, and they chew your head off every single time? Eventually, as a human being, you're going to be like, you know what? I'm not going to go out on the floors anymore because they're angry and I don't know what else to do for them. And so it's that follow through piece, and it's the acknowledgement of that says, hey, you are not going to be able to sustain your passion under these current conditions. And so so my job is not only to say, hey, leadership, we have some things to work on, but also, hey, line staff, leadership's working on some stuff. Will you quit being jerks and listen? And then while they're working on stuff, can you please work on some stuff? Like so it's, and that's why I said earlier, it's all of us. Everybody's got to walk the same way, or it's not going to work. I mean, it's basic relationship construct, right? It's like if my wife doesn't want to be happy and committed, then it's not going to work, no matter what I do, no matter what I say, no matter how much I care. And so the culture, I like that you started with that. The culture needs to be outed. It needs to say, hey, it's toxic, and it's toxic because XYZ, because we're all stressed, we're all dealing with stuff, and we all have roles to play. We all feel like somebody else is dealing with something else. Now, can we just all stop that and say, where do we go from here? That's what I'd like to see.
Bury the hatchet and unite with that goal in mind of more than survival.
Right.
Well-being, wellness, health, meaning, purpose, accomplishment, fulfillment. Yes. So we have to do a lot of forgiving and burying hatchets and learning to work together,
and it has to be an ongoing, and it has to be consistent, and it has to, my wife works in a pediatric hospital, and every once in a while she'll get oh, great job, we really appreciate what you do. By the way, you've got 12 charts that need to be done. They have to be done by tomorrow. We really don't care. There's 25 patients that need to be seen today. You need to take care of all these things. Oh, I hope you don't have to stay too late. Well, bye. Yeah, try to get yourself home.
Right.
No, it's not a consistent, you can't just say, oh, yeah, I really care about you. By the way, here's all this other stuff. It's got to be tangible. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be.
Let me give you this example. I'll tell a quick story. I wrote that article. I published it in the Correctional Oasis, and I got a screaming phone call from a director because he couldn't believe that I felt this way about leadership, and I'm so out of touch. And when am I going to grow up? And then he says, let me send you this. And he sent me the article that they printed out, and their entire day, their leadership team was spent on dissecting, highlighting, making notes, disproving things that I said in my article. And I said, that's great. I said the entire reason that I wrote that article is because you had the whole day to sit and dissect my article.
Yeah.
That's why. If you have time to do that, then you have time to go meet your staff. You have time to go talk to your staff. Like, I'm not saying that nobody is doing anything. I'm saying there is room for improvement.
Always.
That's it. And so, but again, it's pockets of people, right? It's not the majority. The majority of us want to push this thing forward. They want people to be fine. They want to just go home and live their life. But sometimes there are squeaky wheels that need to be addressed, and that's the purpose. I want to be thought provoking. I want you to look at and reflect what you're doing. And if you're doing everything great, then great. I'm not talking about you. Then you have nothing to work on ever. But if I piss you off, pardon my language, then there's probably something. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that you feel a certain type of way. And so, can we look at that? Can we start there? And by the way, while you're doing those things, I'm also doing things too. And so, yeah, man, I love what you said. And it's just, I guess to sum it all up, it's all of us. It's all responsibility to push this thing forward.
The phrase "good trouble" comes to mind.
I like it. I like it.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
You know, I'll close with, I'll say one thing. I really thank you all for showing up and hanging in there all this time. I know how precious time is. We don't get it back. That tells me how hot this topic is, how loaded it is, emotionally charged, how much need there is, and how really truly we need to understand what the word priority means. Ponder that. The word priority. What does it mean to prioritize something? What does it really, 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 really mean? And what will it take to actually do it? And because I don't think we're going to go much further if we don't make this a priority.
And I would just like to thank our tech advisor behind the scenes and coordinator, Justin Stevens. He's done a great job for us. I'd also like to thank our guests, Bill and Katerina. We appreciate you. We appreciate the work. What you do is truly immeasurable. Thank you. Thank you. And to our audience, thank you for attending. To those that work in corrections and law enforcement and all our military veterans, thank you for your service. Please be safe, take care of yourselves, and watch out for each other.